As of 2023, 212.6 million Americans play video games for at least 1 hour a week. This is equal to 65% of the population. Video games' widespread popularity and influence on society has prompted an analysis of its effects on the players. Since such a large percentage of the population plays video games, it is important that this analysis happens, since it is important to know whether these effects are beneficial or harmful. From the drawback side, a 2003 study authored by Craig Anderson and Christine Murphy found that even brief exposure to media violence can immediately facilitate aggression and have long-lasting impacts on the player. Such a result is indicative that video games should be avoided for their harmful effects. However, proponents of video game play argue that video games allow for children to use their excess energy and express their creativity, which suggests that video game play should be encouraged because of its beneficial effects. This disagreement leads to a question. To what extent should parents regulate their children's video game play? In reading Liana Zanet's 2019 journal article, Predator-Induced Fear Causes PTSD-like Changes in the Brain and Behavior of Wild Animals, and Doris Lessing's 1957 short story, Through the Tunnel, a common theme of isolation emerged. In Predator-Induced Fear, the study found that when animals were trapped in an inescapable box by themselves and exposed to predator noises, they experienced PTSD-like changes in the brain and remained on high alert for the next 7 days. In Through the Tunnel, a young boy uses his parent-given freedom to train his swimming abilities and find a newfound confidence in himself. Extended video game play is often associated with isolation, leading to the topic of video games. From a scientific perspective, there is evidence to support heavy regulation of video game play. For example, as stated earlier, since animals can be exposed to predator-induced or PTSD-like changes in the brain from predator-induced fear, horror games that aim to create a similar atmosphere of being hunted down by a more powerful force can have negative effects on the players and could cause changes in the brain. From a social perspective, however, there is evidence to support video game play. For example, at the end of Doris Lessing's short story, the young boy finds a new confidence in himself and no longer seeks the approval of others. He takes an opportunity that would not have been possible with heavy parental regulation. Similarly, Phyllis Ademir argues in her 2019 journal article that Digital Gaming and Its Effects on Children, that video games allow children to express their extra energy and their creativity. This connects to Lessing's perspective because it explains exactly what benefits children can experience with little regulation. Therefore, social implications indicate that video game play should be encouraged. Although extended video game play poses physical drawbacks, parents should have little regulation over their children's video game play because it has mental, rehabilitative, and, to an extent, physical benefits. Let's start with the mental benefits. For example, research has shown that certain video games aid in the academic process. So, since these video games can directly correlate to academic success, they should not be heavily regulated by parents. Also, video games have rehabilitative properties for children with mental and physical disorders that are often overlooked by the public. For example, research has shown that motion capture video games can aid in the motor and cognitive skills of children with cerebral palsy. Research has also shown that video games help children with autism regulate their emotions. Therefore, since the benefits of video games are not only limited to able-bodied children, parents of disabled children should open their minds to the possibility of little video game regulation. In addition, physically interactive video games, referred to as extra games, can provide benefits that may be similar or possibly even better to traditional training. It also lowers the risk of injury since children would not be playing real-life sports. Despite the documented benefits, some continue to argue that video games cause aggression, such as Shani Varghese and Carolyn Phillips in their 2022 journal article, Violent Video Gaming and Aggression in Children. They found that children who repeatedly play violent video games showed higher levels of aggression than children who repeatedly play non-violent video games. This point of view makes sense because some video games encourage aggression to beat the game. However, they admit that aggression is a complicated trait which is not easily controlled by one factor, such as playing violent video games. And so, limiting video games on the sole basis of avoiding its aggression-inducing properties is not sufficient in justifying regulation. Whether it is right or wrong, no change comes without significant implications. For example, children would most likely spend more time indoors with more opportunities to play video games. This may be good or bad and should be acknowledged. In addition, children would most likely communicate online more than in person, with more opportunities to play video games and connect with their friends outside of school. While extreme regulation would help children avoid the drawbacks of video games, it spares them from the benefits, while the opposite is true about no regulation. Also, this position is not without its limitations. For example, extended play of non-physically interactive video games can result in physical drawbacks, which rules out zero regulation as a viable option, since it will do nothing to correct the bad habit. In addition, children who communicate predominantly online may have trouble communicating with children who don't. In conclusion, video game play's mental, rehabilitative, and physical benefits justify little regulation of parents over their children's video game play. Scientific perspective indicate that video games should be avoided for their negative impacts, but social implications suggest the opposite. As the world continues to evolve digitally and more people are exposed to video games' effects, it is important that parents set a good precedent for their children's adult life because the correct amount of regulation will affect them in the moment and later. Thank you.
All right, ready for your oral defense?
I think so.
Okay. Did your research go in a different direction than you originally expected?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Did your research go in a different direction than you originally expected?
Interestingly, no. So initially I knew I wanted to research video game play's effects on children because my parents had a unique method to expose me to that. So they were very heavily restrictive, and then once I turned around 10 or 11 and they started to trust me a little more, they just stopped all restriction. And so I thought that was really beneficial to me and affected the person I am now. So I wanted to research that and bring that to public view. And so my research question and my research topic did not change throughout.
Okay. And how did you use the conclusions or questions of others to advance your own research?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How did you use the conclusions or questions of others to advance your own research?
That is an interesting question. So when I began researching, there were a lot more sources than I initially thought. So I gathered sources from both sides, and I looked at their arguments, and I tried to find arguments saying the opposite, and that was a lot of what drove my counterclaim and rebuttal, and it also helped me decide which side to argue.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
You were sitting at around 6 minutes and 20 seconds.
Perfect. Here's the clicker.